The spiel, calibers, and concessions. So I think almost every day this week I talked about guns or gun control or the havoc and killing that guns hath wrought. And over the course of the week, due to the pronouncements that I've made on this show, or Slate took a couple of my comments and made a posting about it, and then Facebook got involved, a lot of people have answered me or countered me or tried to offer different arguments. And I've read through those arguments. And I think mostly I have counters to the arguments, but I do have an overweening concession. But I think in my concession is the best argument yet. So let's start with the fact. 35,000, maybe a little fewer, maybe a little more, 35,000 or so people will be killed by guns in the United States this year. 2 out of every 3 people killed by guns will do so by their own hand, suicides. 10,000 gun homicides, 20,000 gun suicides, add a few thousand here or there. Know that, hold on to that stat, and I'm going to come back to it. So here are some of the arguments that people put forward to me after I argued that we need some gun control. One, this was actually not put forward to me, but I follow Rich Lowry, the editor of National Review, on Twitter, and he said if gun control were a good method of preventing terrorist attack, Paris would never be hit. Well, that's one isolated case. Paris's overall homicide rate is 80% lower than the United States. So if gun control were good at preventing from killing people, wait, it is 1.4 per 100,000 in France, 5 per 100,000 in the United States. Gun control is really good if you do it well in preventing people from getting killed. But what about terrorism? And I'll concede that. It may be true that a determined terrorist will find a way, a pipe bomb, a legally obtained gun, knives, a terrorist will find a way to terrorize. Remember, I talked about the 30,000 plus people who are killed each year. There have been in the United States since 9/11, let's count the 14 in San Bernardino, there have been 43 people killed by Islamic terrorists in the United States and almost 50 people killed by right-wing terrorists. It's fewer than 100 people killed by terrorists, not a year since 2001 versus 10,000 killed each year by guns. So I will concede, I don't know if this is true or not, but let's say everything we do about gun control will not stop any of the 10 or so killings we've averaged a year because of terrorism. I concede that. Here's another point. The guns were bought legally in California, one of the most strict states in the union. Tell us again what laws should be passed. I get iterations of this all over. Guns, here's something from The Silence tweeting to me. Guns were purchased legally. Nothing about gun control would have stopped this. I will concede California is the best rated state by the Brady Center. They actually, compared to the other 49 states, have strict gun control laws. But that's compared to the other 49 states of the United States. We're never going to get to the state of one of the countries of Europe, but good gun control can absolutely prevent a tragedy like this. Could gun control that we realistically get in the United States prevent this? I'm not sure. I'm going to say probably not. But the point is, it could prevent something. And when people ask, what laws are you proposing? Well, the laws that Julian Zelizer was talking about Congress never passing, the Senate actually introduced a bill today that went nowhere. Among those laws, if you're on the terrorist watch list, you can't get a gun. Background checks for people who sell privately. Background checks for gun shows. Background checks for the internet. Again, would any of those have stopped this terrorist attack? I will concede maybe they wouldn't have. I'll concede that they wouldn't have. But here's an analogy. Not every seatbelt would stop someone from dying in a car. There are some accidents that not any bit of crumple zone technology, seatbelts, airbags, very efficient EMS and EMT responses. You could bring all that to bear, and there are some auto crashes that are just so bad that nothing would have helped. But you know what? We did all that we could and are continuing to do all that we can in the name of auto safety. Does that mean that no one dies in car crashes? Nope. The last year, 2013, 32,000 Americans died in auto crashes. And that's horrible. But you want to know something? In 1972, 52,000 people died in auto crashes, which is amazing. 20,000 fewer people as the population has increased by more than 100 million. The auto fatality rate has gone down from about 25 per 100,000 to 10 per 100,000. Why don't we do this with guns? I don't know, because no one clings to their cars like they cling to their guns, I guess President Obama would say. But the point here is that arguing that any particular shooting wouldn't be prevented by any law doesn't mean that every shooting wouldn't be prevented by any law. Someone emailed me, none of the gun laws would have prevented Dylann Roof from killing those people in South Carolina. Actually, it's untrue. There is a law, the private sale ownership background check law that 10 states have, that South Carolina doesn't, that says if someone is a felon or being prosecuted for a felony, you can't even sell them or give them a gun privately. Dylann Roof's dad gave him a gun. That wouldn't be allowed in 10 other states. Would it have been caught? I don't know, but it would have lessened the chances of that one tragedy happening. But anyway, my overall point, you could point to any one tragedy and argue if any one gun control law would have helped it, just as you could point to any car crash and argue if a particular crumple zone would have definitely helped solve it. But overall, if you pass a society-wide raft of laws, some of those tragedies will diminish. KU Nui tweeted me, "Hey, why is Wyoming 60% armed while simultaneously having a lower murder rate than European countries?" Well, I think it has something to do with people per square mile, but I checked the facts, and it turns out that Wyoming, with a homicide rate of 1.9, is higher than 31 of 43 European countries. And one of the countries it's not higher than is Ukraine. I think sparsely populated areas are less likely to be murderous, Alaska being the exception. But even countries in Europe with higher murder rates than Wyoming, like Norway, has a murder rate of 2.2. That's less than half the United States murder rate. It is so funny to me that so many people say, look, gun control laws aren't going to do anything. I live in New York City. It has the strictest gun control laws. Does it work? Yeah, it works spectacularly. Do you know New York State? I'm not even talking about the city. I'm talking about upstate counties like Ulster, where the mayor said everyone here should be armed. New York State has either the lowest or second lowest rate of murder by gun. And that's because New York City is such an exemplar in terms of murder rate by guns. Well, what about Chicago? Fine. What if you pass great gun laws, restrictive gun laws in two cities? And they don't work in one due to a variety of factors, mostly reliant on the fact that Chicago is easy to access from other places with terrible gun laws. Fine. But what if you have two cities? They both pass very restrictive gun laws, and one city it doesn't work in and the other city it does. What reasonable forget gun, take gun away from the conversation. Any kind of thing that we don't want to have. You pass a law to limit the thing. It works in one city, it doesn't work in another. Do you say, let's not pass that kind of law? It is working in one of the cities. It's working in the city I live, happens to be the bigger city. Gun laws work. They work in America's biggest city. They work dramatically in America's biggest city. And if America's biggest city is next to other localities which have decent gun laws, there's a multiplier effect. Now, let me come back to the statistic. 20,000 people by their own hand, more than 10,000 people by someone else killed by a gun. And that is so horrible. And there's nothing good about that except this. The number is so high. Do you realize that the number is so high, so astronomically high? We live in a large country, but the murder rate is so high that even if these gun laws are half ineffective, are 80% ineffective, are 90% ineffective, it still means thousands of lives saved. We're in such a bad position that doing almost anything will save thousands of lives, and yet we still consciously choose to do nothing, and who cares about those thousands and the many thousands more to come?